If you drive Interstate 5 south through downtown San Diego, you'll pass a neighborhood that looks like it was built around the freeway rather than the other way around. That's because it was. In 1963, the state opened a 2.8-mile stretch of Interstate 5 through the heart of Logan Heights, splitting the neighborhood in half. 3,000 homes were demolished and 15,000 residents were displaced. And the paper trail behind that decision is sitting in a 1954 planning map the state never intended for the public to see. The map shows the route that was chosen, and more importantly, the routes that weren't. Logan Heights wasn't a neighborhood that happened to be in the way. It was one of San Diego's earliest settled communities, established in the 1870s when Alonzo Horton's new town pushed development south of downtown. By the early 1900s, Mexican, Italian, and Jewish families had settled there. It was a working-class waterfront neighborhood with its own commercial corridor on Logan Avenue, its own churches and schools, and an identity that had been building for nearly a century. At its peak, it held nearly 20,000 residents. Families lived there for generations, and the neighborhood had been there for decades before any planner arrived. Then the maps arrived. In 1954, the California Division of Highways produced a planning document for Interstate 5 through San Diego. The map showed a straight line cutting directly through Logan Heights. That map isn't remarkable, but what it doesn't show is any alternative route through the neighborhoods west of the site, the whiter and wealthier areas that would have faced the same kind of disruption. Jacob Dekema was the district director for the Division of Highways from 1955 to 1980, and he explained his philosophy in interviews years later by saying they found out where people were coming from and where they were going. Then they drew a straight line and tried to build the freeway there. But that straight line didn't go through Mission Hills or University Heights or North Park. It went through Logan Heights, a neighborhood that had been systematically devalued by the city's own zoning decisions for decades, and the 1954 map shows exactly where the line was drawn. Here's the part that doesn't show up on the map. In the 1940s and 1950s, the San Diego City Council rezoned large portions of Logan Heights from residential to industrial and mixed use, and that decision brought junkyards and welding shops into what had been a residential neighborhood. Naval operations expanded along the waterfront and cut off the community's access to the bay, and the neighborhood lost one of its most important connections before anyone ever looked at a highway map. By the time the freeway planners arrived, Logan Heights was already classified as blighted, but not because the buildings were failing. The city had intentionally allowed industry to encroach on residential blocks, and it created the exact conditions that would later justify taking the land and calling the neighborhood a lost cause. Zoning records tell the story of a city that weakened its own neighborhood, and then used that weakness as a reason to erase it, and they prove the whole thing was a setup that took decades of rezoning and industrial encroachment to prepare. That map looks like a traffic plan. The receipts show it was a setup. Construction of I-5 through Logan Heights began in the late 1950s and was substantially complete by 1963. The freeway didn't just pass through the community. It split it in half, and the area west of the freeway became Barrio Logan, while the area east retained the name Logan Heights. Both were severed from the city. The demolition cleared 3,000 homes and displaced 15,000 people, and some community historians who studied the records believe the actual number was significantly higher than anything the official count ever admitted. The San Diego Historical Resources Survey describes the entire event in a single sentence that says when Logan Heights was bisected by the construction of Interstate 5 in 1963, the community was divided into two distinct neighborhoods. That sentence misses what it meant for a family to find a notice on their door. It doesn't show a block of houses reduced to rubble, and it doesn't show a neighborhood that had existed for nearly a century being called blighted by the same city that made it that way. The map doesn't show the people. The freeway wasn't the end of it. In 1967, construction began on the San Diego Coronado Bay Bridge, and the bridge approach cut through Barrio Logan at street level on concrete pillars, creating a second barrier between the neighborhood and the bayfront. By 1969, Logan Heights had been carved up twice. The community that had been one of the largest Mexican-American enclaves in California was now a collection of isolated blocks surrounded by freeways, bridges, and industrial zones that cut it off from everything around it. In April 1970, residents of Barrio Logan noticed construction equipment at the site where the city had promised them a park, and the equipment was preparing the ground for a highway patrol substation instead of the green space they had been promised. Hundreds occupied the land for 12 days and won what would become Chicano Park, a National Historic Landmark under the bridge today. The murals on the bridge supports depict that struggle, and the most famous reads Barrio C. Yankees no yes to the neighborhood, no to the junkyards. But Chicano Park is 7 acres under a bridge. It doesn't replace the 3,000 homes, it doesn't bring back the 15,000 people, and it doesn't change what the 1954 map set in motion. Here's the actual paper trail. The rezoning that flipped Logan Heights from residential to industrial sits on record as case file LH27, pushed through the city planning department across the late 1940s and into the 1950s, years before anyone drew a freeway route. Then there's Dekema's own account of how the corridor got picked. He didn't say his engineers studied the neighborhood and picked the best route. He said they found out where people were coming from and where they were going, then drew a straight line and built the freeway on it. That line skipped Mission Hills, skipped University Heights, skipped North Park, and landed on the one neighborhood the city had already rezoned into a junkyard. And the official count doesn't hold up either. Historians who went back through the relocation records found parcels that never made it into the state's tally, and business displacements that were never logged as homes at all. Their estimate runs higher than 15,000, and nobody with the authority to fix the number ever went back and did it. A rezoning file, a director's own words, and a body count nobody double-checked. That's the receipt. A route picked not because it was the only option, but because it was the neighborhood nobody with power was going to fight for. The 1954 map traces the route of a freeway, but it doesn't show the 3,000 homes that were demolished to build it, and it doesn't show the families who scattered across the city. It doesn't show the small businesses on Logan Avenue that never reopened, and it doesn't show the children who grew up in a neighborhood that no longer exists except in memory. The Environmental Health Coalition notes that when Interstate 5 was built through Logan Heights in 1963, thousands of homes were destroyed and families displaced. That's one sentence for 15,000 people. Today, Barrio Logan remains one of the most polluted neighborhoods in California, and the 2023 Community Plan Update created a 65-acre buffer zone between housing and industry, which is a recognition that the zoning decisions of the 1940s and 1950s created conditions that have taken 70 years to begin addressing. The freeway is still there, the bridge is still there, and the community is still fighting. Drive I-5 south past downtown today, and the neighborhood is still cut in half. Barrio Logan sits west of the freeway, Logan Heights sits east, and the murals under the Coronado Bridge are still there, holding up the only proof that anyone fought back. The map that put the freeway there is 70 years old. The fight over what it did is not over. If this one surprised you, subscribe so you don't miss the next case file.